This is going to be amazing. We're going to learn how to recruit and retain high performers. Everybody, put your hands together and welcome Caleb and Neil Stephen, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah! All right. Everybody stand up for just a minute, if you will, please. We put that fitness enthusiast thing in there for you, Corey, so it's a good thing. I hope we don't get too much feedback here, but maybe, JP, you can control that. But anyway, excited to be here. I want everybody, I like Miss Casey here. Let's give Casey a round of applause. Casey has helped put this on. She's worked tirelessly to put a presentation together and the room together and all that. So thank you so very much. Nobody steal her. Now, she is a high performer, but you can't have her. But what I want to do on the count, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get rid of that. So on the count of three, I want everybody to put their hands in the air and say, woohoo! All right, you ready? All right, so Casey's going to video this. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Woo! All right, thank y'all for doing this because my wife and Caleb's wife will never believe we got a standing ovation for this. So today is a practical conversation. We're really here to talk. It's not a keynote. Those of you who were there for the Business Summit and heard Jesse Cole and many other speakers, I mean, that's not what today is designed to do. Today is designed to be more practical in the things that we have learned that we can implement, that you all hopefully can take some nuggets back and implement on how to retain and recruit. The key word here, high performers. You know, if you got low performers or no performers or whatever it may be in your company, you have to deal with that, right? We all want those that are high performers. So this assumes that these individuals that you're recruiting and retaining are high performers. But I'll begin by just saying, as kind of a beginning point, I would encourage all of you, if you don't have an operating process for your company, you really need to consider an overall operating process and procedure. And I would think most successful companies have that in place already, but if you don't, I highly encourage you. This happens to be ours at Oconee State Bank, and I'm not going to go through all this. It's very complicated and complex when you begin to break it down. But it is the system by which we operate here every single day. And we don't necessarily go around talking about it to the team every day, but our executive team and our leadership, every day we're thinking about this operating process. We happen to call it the remarkable flywheel. It builds on each other. But today, what we're going to be doing is sort of diving into one element of this flywheel, and it's even one element of that element. I mean, this is just a small part, and that is how to retain and recruit high performers and truly how to create team engagement. But I would encourage you, we're going to be having probably some roundtables and some pilot groups on creating an operating process. So maybe if some of you are interested, we can get together afterwards and talk about how we may want to do that. But we can't go into this talk without saying that this overall process is so important and vital to any organization. With that being said, Caleb, I know you shared a slide with me a few months back that was very intriguing.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to share that with the team today.
Yeah, well, real quick, any golfers in the house by chance? Anyone play golf? Wow, not as many. So I might be one of the only bankers on the planet that doesn't play golf, or at least not regularly, and is not very good. But I really love golf. And about 3 years ago, I was on the golf course with my buddy Preston, who played golf at Furman, really good golfer. And we were teeing off on hole number 10, and Preston hits a terrible shot off into the rough. Really bad shot, which is uncharacteristic of Preston. So I go looking for it. I'm his caddy for the day. I'm trying to help him. It's a nice Saturday afternoon. It's in April, perfect weather. And I'm looking for his ball, and all of a sudden, I feel like someone has taken a metal baseball bat and wham! Whacked me right on the top of my head. And I pull off my hat. I grab my knees. I pull off my hat. And it's like a fountain of red Kool-Aid that's pouring out of my head, i.e. blood. And I start screaming and yelling, and I'm like, what in the world just happened? Was a bird flying straight ahead and didn't see me, and its beak punctured my scalp? Did a pine cone fall? What just happened? And Preston throws me his golf tower, towel. I grab it, I plaster it to the top of my head. It's just getting soaked in blood. I call my dad. I'm like, I think I got hit by something. I don't know what happened, but you need to come. And about 5 minutes later, a group of 3 guys come walking over, and one of them has a particularly horrified look on his face. And unbeknownst to me, they also were teeing off from 300 yards away on another hole, had also hit a terrible shot, and it landed right on the top of my head from 300 yards away. Thankfully, it didn't hit my teeth or my eye or my temple, or I may not be here right now. It hit right there, right underneath my hairline. So I get wheeled up to the front of the clubhouse. The paramedics come, they clean me off, and they say, we think you're okay, but you have a 1-inch laceration on your scalp, and you need to go to the hospital and get stitches. The golf pro who worked at the athletic club also came up, and he was like, dude, that's crazy. Did you know 30 people die from this every single year? And I'm like, I think you're saying congrats on not dying, and you're still alive so far, but can't really tell. So they take me to the hospital, and I'm put in a wheelchair, and they wheel me back. And I'll never forget the question that the nurse asked me. The very first thing that any medical professional asked me when I got to the hospital. They asked me this question: did he yell 4? In other words, did the golfer who hit you give you a heads up that danger was coming? That, hey, if you don't pay attention to this, bad things are going to happen. Why do I share that story with you? To me, the stats I'm about to share with you all, if you haven't seen them, maybe you have seen them, but I kind of call these 4 stats. We need to pay attention to these because this is a warning sign for what's to come if we're not intentional about recruiting, developing, and retaining top talent. This right here is what's at stake. So, in the words of my friend Tim Elmore, the corporate ladder has become the corporate lily pad you can see here. Average length of time spent in a role by generation. In 2015, I interned with Chick-fil-A in their marketing department when I was in college, and their retention is amazing. It's like 97%. And a lot of that goes back to Truett Cathy, their founder. When he hired you, it was sort of a handshake agreement back in the day when he started the company in the 70s and the 80s. It was sort of a handshake agreement that you would always be there. And they took great care of you. They had an awesome culture. You were well compensated. But when Truett hired you, he expected you to be around for a long, long time. And of course, today, times have changed. And so Gen Z, millennials, you see there Gen Z, 2 years and 3 months at an average job, which I think is pretty staggering. Another way to look at this is it's not just time spent in a role, and there could be a number of reasons for why they leave. It could be better opportunity, it could be, the stereotype with millennials and Gen Z is that they're lazy and they're entitled and they're never satisfied and delayed gratification. They can't handle that, and maybe some of that is true. But perhaps some of it also could be they're working for leaders that aren't creating a compelling reason and a compelling culture to work at their companies. Another way to look at this is Gallup's State of the Workforce. This was from 2021. So 34% of U.S. workers say they are engaged. 50% say they are not engaged. And get this, 16% say they are actively disengaged. So it's not that they don't care. They actually care a lot about not caring at all. We hear today, if you're on LinkedIn, you hear all those articles about quiet quitting, doing the bare minimum, just sort of hiding, just getting by, just get my paycheck and go home kind of thing. I would probably put some of those folks in this actively disengaged category. So you put that in perspective, only 3 out of 11 team members at most U.S. companies are engaged. I had the opportunity, I run a podcast for South State Bank where I work, and I had the opportunity to interview Mark Miller about this. And he said, think of it like a football team. He said, I spent some time with the defensive backs coach at Clemson a couple years ago. And he said, we grade every single player on every single play throughout the entire spring practice. And he said, imagine if 6 out of 11 players on a team are not engaged and you're trying to run a play, and 2 are actively trying to sabotage the team and sabotage the play. This is what we believe is at stake if we don't lean in, define, and put time and effort into team engagement and recruiting and retaining top talent. And by the way, I interviewed a different guy on our podcast recently, and he talked about this this survey here, and he said the year actually doesn't matter. He said go back 10 years, go back 5 years, all of these numbers are almost the exact same. So it's pretty wild to think about how every year we're not getting any new results, and it's probably because of our approach. And so I think it's important that we define what team engagement is and why it's so important. And I know you've spent some time kind of thinking through what's the definition of team engagement? How do we measure it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a common sense thing, right? To think about team engagement and team being engaged, but you got to measure what matters, right? And you got to really define it and understand it before you can really measure it. I'm convinced that high team engagement is what leads to retention of top talent. I think when your team is truly engaged every day, if they truly come to work engaged, it's going to be hard for them to leave your organization unless there's a real reason, if they move or get married or move, spousal situation or whatever may happen there. I also think it's easier to recruit because a high engaged team member is going to be your best recruiter. They're going to tell everybody in the world about, you got to come to work for our company. So how do you define it? I don't like to put a lot of words on a PowerPoint, but I think this is important. Team engagement is the quality of your team's feelings and their connection to each other and the company's vision. So how do they feel about coming to work for your company every day? And how connected are they to the other people in their organization that they work closely with? That's truly what engagement is. When there's a high level of connection and when they feel connected to your company's vision, there is a high level of engagement. So when high-performing team members are actively engaged, this is what will happen. They will be motivated to bring their best and highest quality of effort and energy to work every single day. Otherwise, they feel deflated. They come in, feeling like, I really don't care because this company doesn't care for me or whatever it may be. You want their best effort and their highest level of energy. And so that's what team engagement is all about. So we talked about the survey, and I'm not here to boast on Oconee State Bank, okay, at all. That is not my intent. But I do know that it's not Neil Stevens, but it's the team and the people within our organization that has worked diligently on these numbers. And when you look at the average U.S. company, as Caleb mentioned, being 34%, about 8 or 9 months ago, we were at 77%. Now, that does not satisfy any of our team members. We're shooting for at least 90. I think trying to get to 100 would be like a major league hitter batting 1,000 throughout the entire year. I just don't think it's possible to get to that level because you're always going to have performance issues and other things that create some level of disengagement. But that number is pretty high compared to the average. 50% are not engaged. We had 15% a while back, 8 or 9 months ago, that were not. And then actively disengaged, 16, and we were at 8. So we're working on increasing these numbers, but obviously we're much higher than the U.S. average. So the question then becomes, what we wanted to talk about today is, what do I feel and does our team feel that has worked for us? What has worked for us? And that's really kind of where we wanted to go with this. And I will begin by just saying that there are really two types of motivators. I think you got to pay attention to both of these motivators. This is what I've learned in my experience. The first is the extrinsic motivators. Don't ever underestimate the importance of this. Compensation plans, stock option, restricted stock units, bonus plans, opportunities to earn incentives, perks, different things of that nature. Every company needs these, and they need to be looking at these very carefully. I think a lot of companies try to fix all their problems, though, by just throwing benefits and cash and perks and bonuses and things. And if your heart's not there, none of this will ever matter. It will be a short-term solution. That's why these are important, but it's important that these two types of motivators are used together because one in and of itself will not create long-term engagement. The second are the intrinsic motivators. That's what we're going to really focus heavily on today. And those are motivators that occur without any obvious external rewards. So to me, this is really where the magic happens. And so in the remaining time, and we'll be brief here, but try to be impactful, we're going to talk about these 5 key intrinsic motivators. And my challenge and question to you is, are you really doing these? They're real easy to look at it and say, yeah, I'm doing that. Yes, I got that. Are you really doing these? Because I have to challenge myself, and we challenge our team. Our team challenges each other every day. Are we truly doing this every day at our bank? I'll quickly cover them. Your leadership as a business owner or a department head or whatever, I can't say enough about that. So important. Are you creating an inspiring environment in your organization? 3, do your team members have meaningful and challenging work? 4, are you appropriately recognizing and appreciating them beyond the extrinsic? I'm talking about the intrinsic nature of recognition and appreciation. And the 5th is personal and professional development. I think these 5 keys, there are others, but I think these are the top 5 things that truly drive team engagement. So with that being said, Caleb, I know you and I have talked a lot about leadership. You've worked for some great leaders in your past. Intrinsic motivator number 1, leadership.
Yeah, well, it was John Maxwell who said everything rises and falls on leadership. He also said people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision. So in other words, you can have a really inspiring vision of the future, where you want to take things, but if folks don't buy into you and you personally and believe in you, why would you expect them to buy into your vision for the future and where you want to take things? And man, if that's not convicting for me and for all of us, that to some level, we probably need to take a greater look, and might need a little more self-awareness. Leadership. There's been a billion books written on leadership. There's a billion ways you could define it. I'll just give you 3 high-level principles that the best leaders that I've worked for in my career embody these 3 principles. These are things I think my dad does very well. I know that Christy and Philip and y'all, the whole leadership team, y'all do this extremely well. 3 things I'd love to share with you. 1 is it's the character you display. It sounds pretty basic, but when you think about it from a day-to-day standpoint, again, it can be convicting. Qualities of a leader, let's just take 3. Humility. I think it was C.S. Lewis who said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. A lot of times we think humility is putting ourselves down or denigrating ourselves or saying, I didn't do anything to contribute to that. It's not thinking of yourself less, it's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. When you wake up every day and you go to work, are you thinking about your team or are you thinking about your own personal benefit and what you're going to get out of it? So humility, consistency. I think this is very important. I think we've all worked for people in the past, or we've had coworkers in the past where, Lord forbid, we've had a parent where you show up and you're just not sure what version of them you're going to get today. I've heard discussions in the workplace before where somebody will say, I can't bring this up with this person today because it's a Monday. I got to wait till a Friday because on Friday I know they're in a better mood and this will be an easier conversation. Man, what kind of friction and roadblocks does that create for you as a leader if folks are always walking on eggshells thinking, what version of this person am I going to get today? Maybe I ought to wait till Friday to bring this up because Monday, I just know how they are on Mondays. So humility, consistency, and then I think finally is competency. Is this person good at what they do? Can I learn from them? Are they somebody who has a track record and has credibility? So again, character, it's a big word. There's a lot of ways you could splice it and dice it. But from a leadership standpoint and in a business context, humility, thinking of yourself less, consistency, do people know what version they're going to get from you every single day, and competency. Are you somebody that really knows what you're doing and is an expert in your field? 2, the words you communicate. I think we've all had scenarios in life where we said something to somebody only to find out 6 months later or a week later that we offended them in some way. And it's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that bothered you or you were offended by that. Could have been something you said to one of your kids, or could have been something you said to a friend and maybe you were just being sarcastic but they didn't take it that way. And you find out later, oh my gosh, I had no idea you interpreted my words that way. I would argue that problem and that situation that we all face from time to time, is magnified tenfold when you're a leader. When you're a leader, your words weigh 1,000 pounds. And I think we all know this because I think we've all worked for folks in the past. We still remember things they said to us that we took seriously, but maybe for them it was just an off-the-cuff comment, or they were just being sarcastic, or they really weren't thinking it through at the time. So really be cognizant of the words that you're communicating to your team, because they weigh an enormous amount. And think through the clarity through which you're communicating. Anybody know Donald Miller in the room? He's a marketing guy in Nashville. He's a marketing guru. Love Donald Miller. He always says, if you confuse, you lose. You think we suffer from the curse of knowledge. You know what you're trying to say at a level 10, and the person you're communicating to needs it at a 2, and you think you're dumbing it down to a 2, but you're really dumbing it down to a 6. They need it at a level 2, and they need to hear it over and over. So the words you say weigh an enormous amount, and it's also important to communicate those words with clarity every day. So your humility, your words, and finally, we're not going to spend any time on this one because this will actually be part of principle number 5, but the opportunities that you create for your team. Do they know where they can go within your company over the next several years? If you don't want Gen Zs to leave after 2 years, well, do the Gen Z folks in your team know where they can be in 5 years, or know where they could be in 10 years? Is there a path? Is there a vision, not just for the company, but for them personally? And I think in principle 5, we'll unpack those a little more. So your humility as a leader, the words you communicate as a leader, and the opportunities that you create for your team as a leader. But to your point, leadership is important, but it's not sufficient, and I think that's a good segue into motivator number 2.
Yeah, as a leader, it's also you're responsible, I believe, to create an environment that's inspiring. Everybody wants to work in an inspiring environment, right? And so what does that really mean? Well, if you could define that, we could go into a lot of discussion about that. I believe there's 2 things that make an environment inspiring. And the first is truly a clear and compelling vision. And I'm talking about a vision on the wall, but I'm also talking about the vision that is lived in the halls. The vision that the leader, the department head, communicates. Is it clear, and is it compelling? Here, and the second piece is creating a team connection around that. So let's talk about this clear and compelling vision part. Any of you feel this way sometimes? Have you ever gotten in your car and it's iced over, and then literally you got that little, back when I was young, you got to get that little ice scraper and kind of scrape the thing off. I guess today the nice defroster is defrosting pretty quickly, but you don't know where you're going, right? How many people in your company or your business feel like this? And maybe even you as a leader sometimes you feel like this, you don't know what's in front of you. Have you created a vision in their mind? Have you articulated in a way that they're crystal clear? If I were to go today and pick one of you out, go ask your people, tell me the vision that your business owner, CEO, department head, or whatever, tell me the company vision clearly as you can, and not just read it from the wall, but where is this company going? Will they be looking at that like this, like, oh gosh, it's a big old fog, or do they see this? Is there a perfect, crystal clear clarity where they say, I know exactly where we're going, and even better yet, take them to the happiest place on earth, the most magical place on earth? Do they see a future? Have you created the type of vision that's not just manufactured, but that's real and authentic in a way that they are compelled and they're very clear on that every single day? So we're not going to get into all these, but Apple, Chick-fil-A, I put our bank up there. Piedmont Athens Regional is here today. I had a chance to speak to them recently and really intrigued by their vision. You could really say, like Apple, we sell electronics. That's kind of what they do, right? We make loans here at the bank. Chick-fil-A sells chicken sandwiches. But when you look at their vision statements, it's a lot more compelling and exciting than that. But more so than that, their senior leadership team of the good companies that do this well articulate that in a way that gets the team really excited and and it compels them to the next level.
And one note too, I think on, especially with Chick-fil-A, I have a lot of friends coming out of college that went to work there, I interned there. I have never met somebody that told me, yeah, Caleb, when I was considering Chick-fil-A, I was between Chick-fil-A and Panera and Wendy's and Burger King and McDonald's, but I chose Chick-fil-A. I've never heard that. What I hear is I was between Chick-fil-A, Delta, and Home Depot, or Chick-fil-A and Newell Rubbermaid or something. It's like they weren't zeroed in on the industry. I really want to work in quick service because Chick-fil-A has done a good job of transcending their industry, and they've created a purpose beyond selling chicken that people want to be part of. You know, what's the saying? If you can't do anything else, you can always flip burgers. I mean, in some ways, quick service is kind of seen as the lowest of the low, but when you think of Chick-fil-A, you think of this really cool brand, this great environment, this awesome team, in ways that you may not make that comparison with other companies. So what you and I have been talking about, you know, with Oconee State Bank or with South State or with any company, how cool would it be is if someone could say, I was between Oconee State Bank and Home Depot and Delta. What would it look like for you to have a vision so compelling that it transcended just your industry vertical?
That'd be cool the day we start taking away from Home Depot and Chick-fil-A and all those companies. Absolutely. So, you know, the next part of this, the vision's important, extremely important, but it's the connection around it. I mean, it's truly, is your team connected to it? Do they have a shared purpose? Let me illustrate this. This is my good friend in the middle here, is Thomas Settles. Thomas is the chaplain for the University of Georgia football team. He also heads up the FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes for University of Georgia. He is a key role. He literally, until the NCAA stopped it, he was in the helicopter with Kirby Smart going on recruiting trips. I mean, he and Kirby are extremely close. Kirby will call him one of his top people in his organization because he can relate to the players. Thomas was very instrumental in starting these skull sessions, what they call skull sessions, which is the connect groups that the University of Georgia football team does. And Thomas actually leads some of those skull sessions for the team. I happen to be really good friends with Thomas. I've talked to him ad nauseum about this and kind of how it works. A couple of well-known players that he's standing there with. But Thomas says this. He says connection, and we're talking about connection to the overall vision, right? And the clarity of it. Connection is the conviction that we are better together. When a team is connected, they are convinced that they are able to accomplish more together. It's the differentiation that makes organizations elite. So having a connectedness to your vision, it takes you from ordinary to elite, and it truly does. I can't describe enough how important that connection is. Let me illustrate. This is the 2000, some of the players on the 2000 University of Georgia football team. Does anybody know anything about this team by chance? This team arguably is the most talented team the University of Georgia has ever had. All 11 starters went to the NFL. Every single one of them. Last year, our team only, I say only, but 9 went, right? This is, I think, by far on paper, the most talented team. 8-4 record. 8-4. And when you dig behind that, and Thomas has shared a lot of these stories with me, every one of those players played for themselves. They were all individualistic. There was no connection. They were here to get a job done. They were there to advance to the next level, to the NFL. No connectedness whatsoever. But you contrast that with last year's team, and even this year's team, who's even less talented than last year's team, arguably. They're still winning games and one of the best teams in the country. It's because of connection. Kirby Smart will tell you this. In fact, that's one of their 4 DNA traits, is connection, when you hear him talk about it. Thomas will tell you from the inside. They work on this every single day. Connectedness around that vision. That's what creates an inspiring environment, is a vision with clarity and the ability to articulate that and getting a team to rally around that. Have you all done that? I mean, literally, if you think about it, Does your team every day come in and do they feel that? I know here we have to work on it every day. It just doesn't happen automatically, and we're not perfect, and we got a long way to go. And we try to get better every day. But it's about creating that type of environment. Let's move to intrinsic motivator number 3.
Yeah, so meaningful and challenging work. So let's get a little more practical, nitty-gritty. The work your team members do every single day, is it meaningful and is it challenging? And I think both are very important. I had Casey find a image of a workplace that looks really mundane. I don't know what this is. Maybe this is a billing department or accounts receivables, or something like that. My dad and I recently spoke to Piedmont Healthcare's leadership team a few months ago, and I was thinking about a company like Piedmont and the meaningful work that they do every day. And I think based on where you sit within Piedmont's system, the sense that your work has meaning probably varies depending on what your role is. So if you're a doctor or you're a nurse, my wife is a NICU nurse, she takes care of babies who are born way before they ought to be born, there's a lot of very apparent, easy to spot meaning to her work. She goes to work, she's taking care of this baby, of this family. I mean, it's a really high calling and it's a really hard job, and you see a lot of tough stuff, and you come home exhausted after a 12-hour shift, but there's instant reward and fulfillment to what she's doing because she can see it in front of her face. But as I've been thinking about this, well, what about the folks in this back office who are billing that family for the time that my wife Grace and the hospital team spent with their child? So when they go home and their child's well and they get a bill in the mail and they're like, oh gosh, insurance, it's not a fun, not a fun thing to see. How do you communicate the mission of Piedmont to the billing department? In other words, how do you show the billing department, hey, when you're billing that family or that insurance company for this hospital services, how do you show them that you're not just collecting money for money's sake? I mean, we need money, that's important. But because you're collecting that money, that in turn gives us more capital and cash and fuel to continue the work that people like Grace and the doctors are doing. Are you making that connection as a leader that your position in billing is no less, it may not be as apparent, but it's no less important than what my wife is doing on the front lines? By billing that family, by treating them with respect, by making it easy to pay their bill and to see what they owe, you're allowing us as a company to put more fuel back into our mission to continue to serve patients with care. So I think the practical lesson here is for the folks who work in your companies that are in back office kind of jobs, are you doing a good job of connecting the vision and the mission of what you do down to the granularity of their mundane tasks? In other words, when the vision is clear, and I would add when the vision is compelling, the mundane becomes meaningful. But I think it's on you and it's on us as leaders to make sure we're doing a good job of connecting it. David Branch, I know you do a great job of this. Y'all take asbestos out of folks' homes and commercial buildings, and it would be easy for somebody to just say, well, I just remove asbestos all day. But you do a good job of saying, we're not just removing asbestos, we're improving people's quality of life, their health. There are sick people that we're serving, and if we don't do this, then we're not going to have the impact in the community that we could be having. And so I know, David, you do a great job of that. And talk to David, talk to a lot of folks in this room who I know are doing a great job of connecting the dots. But in my opinion, it's not enough for it to just be meaningful. It also needs to be challenging. I think if you don't have challenge to your work, if you don't have some level of voluntary difficulty, you won't go home every day as fulfilled. You may have some meaning, but if there's no challenge to it, I think we as humans are hardwired to take on a challenge. But that said, you also want to have an environment of high support. So high challenge and high support. If you have low challenge but high support, call that mediocrity. If you have high challenge and low support, that could lead to a mutiny. We hear all the time about Wall Street cultures of 100-hour weeks and backstabbing and all kinds of horror stories. That's an easy way to lose trust in your people and people to lose trust in you if there's a high challenge but there's no support. If there's low challenge and low support, that leads to a funeral. You probably won't last in business for very long. So, that's not where you want to be. But high challenge and high support leads to a remarkable culture. So if you can connect the dots, show folks, even down to the people in the back office, that your work has significance and meaning, and here's why. You may have to draw it out for them, or you may have to spend some time talking about it, but be intentional about showing them why their job has meaning, and give them a role that challenges them but also supports them. So they're not on an island, they're not all by themselves, but they also have a mountain to climb. But it's a mountain that's really exciting, that they want to climb because they realize the impact that they're having in their work. And that leads to number 4.
Yeah, number 4, I think this is a really big one, recognition and appreciation. And again, this goes beyond the extrinsic, so that's important. But these are intrinsic recognition and appreciation principles here. Zig Ziglar, who knows Zig Ziglar? Ever heard of Zig Ziglar? Yeah, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. That's so important, a great Zig Ziglar quote. Don't be this person. Apparently this went viral during COVID. Don't be this person. Recognize and appreciate your coworker. Clean their stairs if you're going to clean your stairs. It's so important. Sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest difference. Let me talk about Miss Lottie. Miss Lottie works right over here at this office. Miss Lottie has been with the bank. She just celebrated 35 years with Oconee State Bank. There may be 3 or 4 tellers in a window, and there might be 9 people deep at Miss Lottie's window, and the rest are empty because they want to see Miss Lottie. And that's the honest to God truth. You can ask the team. That is the truth. Go over today and test it out. You'll see that to be the case. We just celebrated 35 years with Miss Lottie, and we gave her a string of pearls, and we did a lot of other things for her. You know what meant the most to Miss Lottie? Lottie's Lounge. There was this little area near our safe deposit box that we turned into her little office, decorated it with purple, different things of that nature. And I went over that day to, this was before the big celebration. I just went over to congratulate her, and she said, "Let me take you back to my office." This big old smile on her face. And so, it's little things like that we do for our team. It goes so far. What have you done with your team to just show a little bit of appreciation that's above and beyond, that requires a little bit of thought on your part? Let me share a story. A CEO friend of mine who runs a real estate company, it's back in Johns Creek, he told me this great story. He had one of his team members that did something really well. And this guy is somewhat of a humble guy, doesn't want a lot of recognition, would never go home and tell his wife, how great he is at work and things of that nature. But this CEO wrote a letter to the wife and kids of this employee, talking about how great a worker he was at the company and the things that he'd done, and cited specific things. And do you know where that letter ended up? It ended up on the refrigerator of their home. And every time this guy walked by, he was like, it just, warmed his heart, because it was like, wow, my family, one of the things guys want, is respect and appreciation, to feel that they're bringing value. And when they see that in their family, this employee told me, he said, "I'll never leave this company." He said, "This guy," he said, he's always very intentional in things he does. And this is just one way. He could have very easily written him a little handwritten note, "Good work today," but he took the time to write the letter to the family. Anybody know the name Fred Smith? Fred was the founder and CEO for FedEx for a number of years. Do a study on Fred and look at how he recognized and appreciated people. It is incredible what he did, and that's the reason FedEx is so successful, is the team that he built around him and how Fred selflessly did his job. I just want to read you something here. He stepped down as CEO to become executive chairman back in June of 2022. But I'll just read a little blurb here. Smith created an open, informal work culture where the talent of employees was well recognized and rewarded. Commenting on confidence and loyalty that employees had in Smith, Art Brass, who was a FedEx employee, he said this: If Fred lined up all of FedEx's employees and told them to jump from a bridge, 99.9% of them would jump. I mean, that's powerful words. I know that Fred read stories about him sitting for an hour or so a day with all of FedEx's employees. I don't know how many they are, thousands, but he would write handwritten notes to various people within the organization just saying thank you for your service to Federal Express. He would get intel on different people, and he would write, David, I just want to thank you today for the work you did. CEO of a company that large to take an hour a day to do that with everything going on, that's recognition. What are we doing in our companies every day to recognize and appreciate our team? Let's move on to personal and professional development.
All right, well, so to wrap up, a few years ago, the UNC Keenan-Flagler School of Business did a study, and they asked millennials, which I think this is a little old, I think this was 2013, maybe 2014. So millennials at the time were sort of the emerging generation entering in the workforce. So I'm kind of the tail end of the millennials. So most millennials now are probably somewhere in their 30s. But they asked them what they look for most in a job. And surprisingly, it wasn't paid time off. It wasn't let me work from home. It wasn't free food and bean bags, in the break room. It was opportunities for personal and professional development. And as I've been thinking about what are some companies that do this well, you actually heard from one of them if you were at the Stronger Business Summit last month, is the Savannah Bananas baseball team. Are anybody familiar with the Savannah Bananas baseball team? So they are a summer college league baseball team. They're not even minor league, which is pretty interesting. Not even minor league, just a summer college league team down in Savannah. And they have a waiting list. They have a waiting list for tickets in the thousands, which is wild. And they do so many things well. They'll have, they've basically taken baseball and turned it into to a circus. It's a show and it's a lot of fun. They have scratch and sniff, tickets that smell like bananas. If you call them, people call them just to be put on hold because their on hold music is so funny and interesting. They'll do backwards nights where they'll start in the ninth inning and end in the first inning. They'll have a guy on stilts come up and hit a base. Just all kinds of funny things. But part of their magic is the culture that their founder, Jesse Cole, has created. And one of the things he said is every new hire, I have them create what I call a future resume. So, Caleb, I want to see your resume. In 10 years, I want to see where you want to be. And he said, the reason I ask for that is A, I want to know what their aspirations are. And B, I want to know that they're hungry and that they have drive and that they want to go somewhere beyond where they're going to start here at our company. And man, what a blessing from your leader if they were to come to you and say, Caleb, where do you want to be 10 years from now? And how can we help you get there? Another example, Lululemon. Chip Wilson would do the same thing. He would have all of their new hires create a 5-year plan for their life. He wasn't saying, where do you want to be in 20 years? That's kind of hard to predict. But 5 years from now, where would you like to be? And somebody asked Chip, they said, aren't you just asking for turnover? Because what if they don't want to be at Lululemon in 5 years? What if they want to be doing something else? He said, honestly, I think if we can help everybody in the company achieve their 5-year vision, whether that means they stay here at Lululemon for the long term or they don't, I can't think of a better recruiting tool for future talent because they're going to go to their peers and say, I got to where I am because I was involved at Lululemon. You hear Nick Saban say the same thing about his assistants. I mean, you talk about turnover at the executive level. I mean, I feel like every year Nick Saban has a different coordinator. And I think Kirby's gotten to this level of success that's starting to happen to him too. And I've heard Nick Saban say before, we want our coaches and our players to say they were more successful in life because they were involved with our organization. And I think that takes a level of humility because it may mean in 5 years they get an opportunity that's not available at Alabama or at Georgia, but what you've done for them sets them up for success. If you love college football, go back and look at, I think it's the 2003 LSU Tigers coaching staff, or maybe it's 2004. Almost every person on that staff is a head coach now. I think the same thing's true for the Alabama 2015 team, even down to like the graduate assistants. I think Dan Lanning, the Oregon coach, was a graduate assistant in 2015, and here he is, coaching the Oregon Ducks, and they're in the top 10. But it's not just, contemporary examples. I think this is also backed by research. So Jim Collins, Good to Great, Stanford professor, wrote, a seminal book on this. In his chapter on getting the right people in the right seats on the bus, he talks about Wells Fargo. And I know there's been a lot of scandals and things with Wells Fargo past few years, but he talks about Wells Fargo back in the 70s and 80s. And he talks about how they were intentional about getting the right leaders and the right people on the right seats on their bus. And 5 of their top executives from, I think, the 80s all went on to become CEOs of other companies later in their career. And they significantly outperformed stock market returns, I think, compared to Bank of America, I think it was. And so it's not just my opinion or a few funny examples of Savannah Bananas. This is backed by folks like Jim Collins who have done research. And in fact, Warren Buffett called that Wells Fargo team, I think it was the 1983 Wells Fargo executive team. He said that is the best executive team I have ever seen of any company in my entire career. And go look them up. They all went on to become CEOs of other great companies in the future. And I think it speaks to, I think it goes back to leadership. Jim Collins coined the term level 5 leadership, personal humility and professional will. Do you have the humility to not make it all about you, but do you have the professional will to say, no matter what, we're going to make this happen? And I think it starts with getting the right folks on the right seats on the bus, but then also giving them opportunities to grow and advance in their careers. And it may mean they stay forever, and it may mean this is a season that they contribute to your team and it's a launching pad to something else. But what a blessing you can be as a leader to the folks on your team, where they may look back in 20 years and say, if it wasn't for that person taking a chance on me, investing in me, I wouldn't be where I am. I know you've had leaders and mentors in your life that have done that for you, and I think it's important that we do that, for our teams.
So obviously Jim Collins never saw our executive team, did they, Philip and Christy? So he would have said that this was the best, and I guess it goes back to humility, right? We got to not just teasing, but in all seriousness, this is something that I think is so very important. And when you look at these 5 things, I'll tell you, we don't have it all figured out here. We don't. These are things that we're working on every single day. Even just listening to some of the things that we've had to do here and work to put this presentation together has convicted me on things that we as a team could do differently and better to inspire our team, to create meaningful and challenging work, to reward and recognize, to create personal development plans for our team. But these matter. These are needle movers. If you really want to see a high level of team engagement, I don't think it's possible to always reach 100%. I think we should strive for it. But if you want to see that 34% average go up to 80, 90% or more, which honestly creates then more value for your organization, these 5 things are needle movers. I can promise you, if you do these well, and you put a lot of thought into it. But the question and the challenge for all of us is, are we really doing them well? Or are we just kind of think we're doing them well, but when you go to our people and you ask them, what will they say? I know that we use Culture Amp to measure our team engagement. I don't know what all you guys may have or use. We do it through surveys and things of that nature, and I think you have to do it throughout the year because you don't want one incident. There could be it's always good to do a survey right after a bonus because everybody's happy. But you don't want to do it right after a big integration of something either, right? Because everybody's frustrated. So if you ask little short questions throughout the year, 3 or 4 questions, and that's something we're working on here is to better measure our overall team engagement. But it's important, and do something about it. If it's low, begin to work on it. But I'm convinced these 5 things are needle movers. So that's the challenging question for this group here and for myself is, how is your team experiencing this? I'll go back. This was just one piece of a larger system. If you don't have this larger system in place, this ecosystem of how your organization runs, because it's more than just people. Talent's so important, but there's also the strategy that you have to put in place. It's creating a vision statement. A number of different things, and we call it the flywheel here. happy to talk more about that as we may put some focus groups together that kind of rallies around some of these items at a later time. But hopefully this has been practical. I hope you've taken some nuggets back, that at least if 2 or 3 things that you can implement during the course of your workday as a leader. We'll pause here. We got about 4 or 5 minutes before 10, and we promise we'll be done by 10. So.